Bibby, who will do a public deputation a little bit later. I have an apology from Councillor Wharehinga, who's not feeling 100% today. He is going to listen, though. He's not going to participate, but he is Zooming in. So hi, Josh. And then I do have an apology for lateness from Councillor Burdett. So I move those apologies. Councillor Burdett. So I will move his apology for lateness, and then later we might just put him an apology. I'm happy to move those apologies. Seconded by Councillor Seymour. All in favour? Contrary, carry. We have no declarations of interest. Confirmation of our non-confidential minutes. Please go to page 3 and take a look for of our minutes. Any issues or questions around our minutes? Thank you. Second, all in favour? Contrary, carried. Let's take a look at our action sheet, which is on page 9. Councillor Cranston.
Just from the minutes on page 5, the council is awaiting the publication of a tourism strategy for the reason. Who's doing that and what are the timelines on the tourism strategy?
Through your worship, that will come through Trust Tairawhiti, the tourism strategy. No.
Back your microphone.
I was going to speak.
Oh, there we go. Councillor Seymour.
I was actually on the action sheet, Madam Chair. Are you now on the action sheet?
We are on the action sheet.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask, and it's on page 9 of our document, and it relates to the item at the very bottom of page 9, 14.1. And it's around the work that was to be done on the Gisborne Yacht Club boat ramp. But because we haven't had a perfectly good track record of talking to all of the potential users, and I see the actions that are identified out there and the action taken around potential costs and liaising with maintenance contractors, I want to know whether we have actually talked to the Tairawhiti Sports Fishing Club with respect to what number of their members boats will be of a size that potentially can launch there, so that we're not developing up something in isolation, and that we've actually talked to all the potential users. Because for those who remember the presentation that was given to us by the Yacht Club, they were very happy for other people to use it. We just need to scope the size of what that use might be, and I want to be sure that we have done that.
Through worship, my understanding is it has been focused primarily on those that are currently using the Kaiti boat ramp, not that has potential to use. So that broader scope of conversation, I'm not aware that has been included, and if that's something that there is a desire to do so, then
thank you, Chief Executive. That was exactly my concern, and that it's not the wrong thing. But the Yacht Club people came in here, gave us a presentation, said they were happy for other groups to use it. Surely, if we're looking at what we might be contributing as ratepayers to a facility, we should be saying, this is the bigger picture. We spent ages doing a 30-year plan for something else. We should actually be looking at what can be done there. So I would like us to be doing a bigger project. What is it that's necessary? All they need to do is talk with the Tairawhiti Sports Fishing Club so that they can say, this is the number of members and what size boats could be used. We don't want to build a huge, great monolith, but we want to build something that we're going to contribute to, because that was the general idea, that is it actually some use, not something that ends up being too small. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Through worship, I think that's something that we can look at pursuing. We have an issue, we know anyway, with the current use and the usage rate and the competing and conflicting priorities down there. So we do need to look at alternatives. So we'll cast the net wider.
Thank you for that. Any questions, Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just adding to that conversation. I'm steering at that yacht club boat ramp every day. It's used widely. It's a public. It's like a main highway down there. People are driving up and down that beach like a main highway, probably more than any other beach in Gisborne. And also there are a lot of boats that use that boat ramp to go surfing out at the island, crayfishing. So there's already a lot of boat use used in that area. And it is a good area for boat launching for certain size boats. Even there are larger boats launching there because of maybe the inner harbour is a bit busy. But yeah, it's certainly worthwhile doing a really good study of that area to really know what we want to have, the outcome. So, yeah, I'd really like to see a bit more input into this, actually.
Thank you. Your Worship, as a proposed way forward, perhaps we bring back to the committee a scope of work that we will commence in the meantime, but for your information, what we will be doing in this space, just to wrap that up.
Madam Chair, my point is just to make sure we talk to all the right people rather than proceed on a basis of some information and then leave some people out who will use it.
Thanks for that. Okay, we've got the
Sorry, Madam
governance.
Chair, I feel I should just ask if we're going to do the bigger picture for that. Obviously, we have an issue with young people jumping in a space that perhaps is the best place for them to jump in. So that's another part of the story, I think, Madam CE, is ensuring that, as Councillor Seymour said, all stakeholders of these spaces perhaps, so our young people would probably appreciate being added to that discussion as per their role in jumping into the port currently. But anyway, that's come up a couple of times in recent days too, so.
Okay, we've got the governance placeholder. Any leave of absence? None that I'm aware of. No acknowledgements and tributes. I invite Mr. Clive Bibby to our table. Welcome, Clive. Thank you for travelling up into the big smoke today. So Clive, just the process. We've got about 8 minutes to talk, and I'll give you the signal from here, the smoke signal, just to leave a few minutes where councillors can ask you questions at the end.
Thank you. Councillors, do you prefer me just to speak like this? Is that everybody can hear it okay? Thank you. Just as a little background information, I'm one of the survivors of this presentation. Actually has been 40 years in its gestation. During that time, I've survived just about every pestilence and disease and downturn in the economy, or whatever you like to throw at it. Banks trying to kick you over the edge. So I'm still here, but during that time, I've gained built up a lot of experience on what works in this community. I understand the people. I actually live right with the people affected Number 3, based on the facilities provided with the development of item number 1, that goes ahead. Develop reticulation infrastructure capable of servicing the whole of the irrigated 18,000 hectares that constitute the Poverty Bay Flats. This development would accommodate the anticipated need due to climate change for transferring the income generating capacity of our current pastoral economy, which is based primarily on our hill country livestock production, to an alternative one based on production of high-end crops on our high fertility flats. This does not mean that we should be withdrawing support for our livestock producers. It is simply a recognition of the likelihood that our traditional major income source will have suffered irreparable damage because of climate change. And we will need to utilise our other limited resources to make up the difference in lost income from that declining sector. Hopefully, the damage to our current agricultural base will not be as severe as currently predicted, but we need to be prepared and plan for the worst case scenario. Number 4, to develop and plan for an expanded local tourism industry based on the construction of a facility that will house our iconic exhibition display of this region's version of our nation's heritage story. In this context, we will need to plan for the expansion of our port to include berthing facilities for both container, see item 3, that refers to the extra production from the crops on the flats, and cruise ships of all sizes. For more in-depth coverage of these ideas, attached to copies of the series of columns featuring each topic that have recently been published in the Gisborne Herald. There. Follow? Just one other point that I haven't written down here, but I think it's appropriate in these times. A final comment to leave with you. While this current pandemic crisis is important and deserves your full attention, it is of temporary concern and will pass. A far greater threat to this community's survival will still be here when the coronavirus pandemic is over. When that happens, we will need to turn our attention to the threat of climate change and take meaningful steps in mitigation to ensure the safety of all our people. I hope my suggestions of how we might do that will help. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your presentation, Clive. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Bibby? Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Clive, for that presentation. Thank you very much. My question is, because you're wanting or recommending reservoirs for water storage for the future with irrigation, do you know the work that's been going on behind the scenes with the Wastewater Management Committee and recommended wetlands and alternative use and disposal?
I do, but the key to all of those investigations, if we include in those the aquifer investigations that are going on now, we need at the end of all those investigations to come up with an answer that includes a reliable source, one we can trust. And I don't care what anybody says, but my understanding of what happens with aquifers and particularly what may happen with climate change, which might affect our ability to actually replenish the aquifer because there simply isn't water flowing in the sources that we might use. That, and also I note the comments that have been made in the paper already discounting the possible use of wastewater for irrigation purposes on food crops. Suggests to me that I'm not the only one who thinks that we need to focus on sources that are going to be reliable. But I'll make one other comment on that, which I haven't made in this, which is very, very important. It's a matter, I feel, of council taking advantage of opportunities which are unique in these times. And I'm particularly talking about the ability to pay for these suggestions. Now, I'm not absconding from the acknowledgement that they're going to be multi-costly, okay? But surprise, surprise, we have a government, albeit one which I don't necessarily share the political ideology, but have to give credit where credit's due. And here they are knocking at the door and saying, fellas, whatever you need, as long as you support the idea, we'll back you financially. Now, contrary to that, the alternative government is already on record as saying that the first thing that'll go by the board is, if they become government, is the PGF. Although they've since modified that to say that there will be some assistance. But what I'm saying is that this availability of these funds is a unique opportunity to get, even if it's just to do the feasibility studies on a lot of these ideas that I'm putting in place. We must take advantage of it. It just seems crazy to me that we should tell Shane Jones to bugger off when he's telling us here that he will provide the money and the government backing long term to change an area north of where I live from a state of dependency into one where we can actually take advantage of the productive capacity of that region. Why would we not do it? And yet it appears that, from what I've gathered at the moment, that the council has every intention of telling them to get lost on that one as well. So, you know, all I'm trying to do is to hopefully encourage council to focus on the here and now, take advantage of the things that are available to us, and most of those involve, or most of those would suggest that any reason we have for turning down some of these ideas, which you may well agree with, is based on the fact that you're worried about being able to fund them. I'm saying Father Christmas is standing in the background. Let's take advantage of it, because he may not be here in 3 months' time.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Clive, and we know how passionate you are about our region. Apart from the potential more for development, can you be more specific about what exactly you mean, and to use your words where we told Shane Jones to bugger off, with respect to, you know, the development of the northern region? Because if we've got a real handle on that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Well, we have to, in order to understand the enormity of what the government is offering here, if he was to declare, or the government was to declare the northern region a special economic zone, effectively, as I understand it, would commit the government, whatever government of the future, to support of that region, and particularly for its economic development. At the moment, that part of the region is in a state of dependency. We all know about the huge cost, I mean, of maintaining the infrastructure that services that region, not just the forestry sector, but also the livestock sector as well. And, you know, his assistance, or the government's assistance in maintaining, would enable them, and I've talked to the leaders of Ngāti Porou about this and their aspirations for developing that part of the territory. And they're gung-ho about the possibilities of developing an economic hub centred on Ruatoria, which would be assisted with funds from the government if it was declared a special economic zone. So it wouldn't just be trying to find another export port for the logs or the forest, support the forest region. It's also, they could open up, you know, do the similar things that I'm suggesting down here on the Poverty Bay Flats. Put in an irrigation, build a dam up there, build irrigation for their Waipu flats. The possibilities are endless. And we have this chance. I'm trying to encourage council to share the vision.
Are you aware whether Ngāti Porou are having their own conversations?
Sorry?
Are you aware whether Ngāti Porou are having their own conversations with ministers over there?
Yes, I am. And that's why I say, with my contacts are pretty high flyers in Ngāti Porou. You know, I mean, we have to acknowledge that one of the limiting factors to these things going ahead are the petty politics that goes on behind the scenes. And Ngāti Porou are having to deal with their own infighting, even at hapu level, which is causing, you know, a lot of chaos up there. But I'm hopeful that, you know, I think as leaders in the community, we have a responsibility to see to share the vision, to have a vision which includes the better good for the most people. We can't allow special interest groups to dictate to the majority based on their sense of entitlement. And that's what I think has been happening far too often here in this region.
I have got Councillor Worsnop going, Councillor Faulkner. Anyone else that would like to, and Councillor Akuata Brown. Thank you. So you go, Kerry.
Yeah, thank you, Clive. So I want to focus specifically on point 1 that you raised, and I tend to agree with you that that we should be looking at a suite of options in terms of resilience with our water resources. I know that we are attempting to do this at the moment, and that's where the aquifer recharge and alternative use and disposal of our wastewater comes in. I agree that in the current environment that there is an opportunity to utilise the view that Minister Jones has, that he's prepared to put some money into this region. Given that the reason we were so successful with PGF funding for our roading was because we had the planning done already. If we are able to access funding to get some of that planning underway, then by all means, we should utilise that. Obviously, beyond the planning phase, it becomes a much, much bigger and more complex beast. Okay, my question is, given that we probably only have the time to request funding for the planning phase, we have a focus already on quite a large project. Would you have us set that aside to broaden our focus?
Well, a bit more background. Out of frustration, I suppose, I've, at my own expense, have been to Wellington trying to get an audience with the Minister. A long time ago, I took with me as my sidekick the Honourable Peter Higgs, who was employed by this council years ago, but a very capable person, somebody who understands exactly what we're talking about and the need here and all the rest of it. I didn't get an audience with Shane Jones, but I did talk to his number 2 person, and his comment to me was absolutely crystal clear. And this was the start of the current government's term. He said, you go back and convince the local iwi and the council to support this idea. He said, we think it's a great idea. He says, we'll write the cheque for whatever it is. So in my experience of these things, as well as particularly watching, if you're talking about building reservoirs, which are hugely costly, is to look at the evidence of where it happened just of recent times for exactly the same reasons as where I'm suggesting we need to do it here. In all the East Coast communities on this, certainly on the North Island, and also including the top of the South Island and Waimea area, Shane Jones's money has been responsible for them building huge reservoirs to in mitigation against the possible damage of climate change. And his money has been the only reason why those projects have all become reality. Now, if you look at the progress through the planning stage for those projects, it's almost inevitable that if a government is prepared to support a feasibility study, then it will go ahead and providing the feasibility study comes up and says, yes, it's doable, we need it, all the right reasons, then they'll follow on with the rest of the money. They'd be hypocritical if they didn't, frankly. So that's that one point. What was the other one you were mentioning? Oh, yeah, well, it was just really to tell you about these examples of these hugely expensive things which we really need to provide this reliable water. And the only person or the only facility or the only agency that has got the capacity to provide that money is government, central government.
Good morning, Clive. Thank you. For those of us that have had a wee bit of a background in supporting water storage, I guess my question is, in the interest of our city ratepayers, what's in it for them?
Well, I think you have to look at what they are being serviced with at the moment and plans that are in the existing plans to actually either maintain or sustain the supply that's required to service the urban area. And clearly, if you look at the reservoirs that are providing water at the moment to the Gisborne city and surrounds, a good percentage of them, possibly in terms of quantity, those that supply over half of them are suspect in the time of a major earthquake or something like that, the Tairawhiti dams particularly. And then if you add to that other so-called potential sources, there aren't too much apart from the Pooninga dams, which is one that we can rely on, and there is a possibility there that we could lift the wall to actually increase the storage capacity. But if we're talking about providing adequate water supplies to cover both the urban and rural needs under a changed or a restructuring situation where we are earning our money from a lot different environment than what we are at present. So in other words, after climate change has wreaked havoc here, so we've gone to the flats, we're irrigating the flats, there is a requirement for water to supply that, but that can't be at the expense, as you've rightly pointed out, of the urban people. So we have to maintain it, but we might as well do them both at once.
Hi, Clive. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. We will have a chat afterwards. We're going to dig into our agenda first, but I will touch base with you in the next week. And thank you so much for driving down. Take care, look after yourself in these uncertain times.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Okay, councillors, we go to page 11. We've got no extraordinary business, no motion, no adjourned business. So today we're digging into 4 decision reports and 1 information report. So let's go to our first report on page 12, which is our trade waste bylaw 2015 review, mortuary waste amendment. Just wait a second, we've got a mover. Coral, you've got that? Page 12. Let me just get to page 12. You guys are on fire. Who moved it? Larry Foster. Thank you. The floor is open for questions or discussion. First, Councillor Worsnop, then Councillor Robinson.
I'm not sure if it's a discussion. I think it's just a question. On page 12, it talks about minor amendments to the trade waste bylaw, the removal of clause 5.5, and then the second bullet point says, including requirements of waste management as part of the annual consenting process, such as. So I take it that, is it just specifically these businesses that are required to be consented annually, or is it everybody under the trade waste bylaw who is captured by any trade waste?
Mr. Wilson.
Through your worship, we ask that we have an annual requirement to do it every year, so they do have to get checked every year. Anyone who has a trade waste consent, so we just take the cost of mortuary
supplementary to that, given our enormous demands on consenting at the moment, and that we have a pretty dodgy track record of keeping up, how practical is it for us to be reviewing these every 12 months? Is it necessary?
So through your worship, in terms of the consent for trade waste, that the single consent sits with Dave's team and they administer it to others. So that's not in the regulatory arm. Yeah, so it's in a different team.
Councillor Seymour, Councillor Dunn, after Councillor Robinson. Okay, Tony, you go first while Pat finds her spot.
On page 18, under considerations financial budget, it says there are no financial matters arising from the decision to review the trade waste bylaw. That may be so. It talks about in the report building the Wisconsin Mound. Do we have an indication of what the costs may be associated with that aspect of this proposal?
Mr. Wilson.
Through your worship, we've budgeted $100,000 for a Wisconsin Mound to be built. That's coming out of the Lifelines budgets is where we would do that from.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. Thank you. My question related to that as well, because in the paragraph, it's at the bottom of page 14, there's some comment there in the script about it being used by land disposal. I thought we had one there already, but are we hearing today that it doesn't exist yet? Because my concern was it going to cope with the additional waste that is going to be brought into it?
Through your worship, this would be a new mound. There's no mortuary waste disposal at Tairawhiti at this stage.
Right.
Thank you.
It's read rather like, can I just further that? I mean, I take that entirely, but I'm trying to read out. It sounded like it was one from that script, and I wondered what waste they actually had already at the cemetery that they require to dispose of, but you're now making it clear that it is a whole new entity. So there will be the capital cost of building it. I have a concern about us embarking down this path, as I've expressed before, because it only captures, probably the greatest proportion,
Probably 90%.
of wastewater where people have been used to wash the deceased after death. It doesn't capture all that happens in people's homes, it happens in rest homes. And have we really thought about what the next step? Many families care for their loved ones at home and prepare their loved ones at home. So I just think that we've embarked on something because we've been pushed and encouraged to do so. But I think we're closing our eyes to another section of what happens in our communities and not facing real facts. Probably not allowed to on this because it's not a trade waste bylaw, because it doesn't come from a venue that provides a trade waste bylaw. But the philosophy of that alternate use is closing its eyes to other activities that happen in the community.
Anyone wants to comment on that, staff? That was a good observation, Councillor Seymour. CEO.
Yeah, through your worship, I think that point has been raised in the past about the consistency, but in this instance, as I understand it, we know that is happening in that environment. It is culturally inappropriate to do so from the perspective of iwi in our region, and therefore this is something in the partnership that they have come through the Wastewater Management Committee to achieve. And so it is in that spirit of partnership and appreciation of the cultural sensitivities that we explored last year.
Just one supplementary, are we requiring it of the two undertaking facilities? Because there is two.
Yeah. Yes.
So through your worship, this would do the undertaking facilities and the hospital as well.
Yeah. No question, Councillor Dunn? No. Councillor Warsnop.
I just had a question around the composting facility, page 16.15. Obviously, there is an expectation that solids will need to be disposed of in a certain way. Would that again be at the cemetery site?
Through your worship, yes, it would all be contained within Tairawhiti.
Any other questions? So just to clarify, this resolution recommendation that we passed today is just to enable us to review our bylaw. Our community will have the opportunity to input into this through the hearings process. So we will go out and ask our community input. So what we're doing today is just determine that a bylaw is most appropriate, and we approve the review of this bylaw. Councillor Dunn.
Just from what I've just heard is what happens to this waste right now? Where does it go?
Trade waste.
To the wastewater, treatment plant?
Through your worship, trade waste from
Goes straight.
the watery is entering into the domestic supply, so it goes through our BTF and out into the bay at the moment.
Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder. Any questions from people that haven't spoken once or twice? You can have your right of reply, yes.
Thank you. The reason I was quick to support this was obviously that progressing the separation of mortuary waste from our wastewater treatment system has been at the forefront of iwi's desires throughout our process and engagement in the wastewater space. It's a very low capital cost outlay to achieve this, and it is abhorrent to iwi that the mortuary waste is treated in the same manner as effluent. That mixing of waters is something that is highly undesirable. So we've been pushing to progress this quickly for quite some time now, and this is allowing us to put the mechanism in place to go forward with what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsing. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. We move on to our next decision report, which is on page 20. It's our Traffic and Parking Bylaw 2011, which is the Inner Harbour amendment that went through the hearings process. Is this Mr. Wilson's department? No? Yours? Just Ms. Koheri, just give us a quick overview and then we will open this report up for questions.
Through the chair, a brief summary. So you're familiar with the recent Inner Harbour parking redevelopments. This is really requesting permission to review the bylaw so that we're able to enforce parking in that area now. So currently we're unable to. And also anticipating that bylaw is the appropriate mechanism subject to consultation on the heavy vehicle routes options that we're currently engaging on. We again want to be able to review the bylaw to enforce the outcomes of that engagement.
So I had one question, and next after me will be Councillor Seymour Akwaka-Brown and Gregory, then Robinson. And the answer might lie in the old report, which I didn't go back to take a good look at. When we say there are two options, we need to pass this bylaw because there are two changes we wanted to make. I thought of us recently talking about Titirangi and making that a one-way. Would that not also have to be included here in order for us to incorporate making Titirangi possibly a one-way option? Would we not also need this as an option in here?
So through your worship, what needed to be included in the bylaw was the speed limit that was set there. So
Okay.
That's the 30k change, that's the bylaw.
So that's
to be able to enforce it.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's good. I just didn't want us to miss that. The floor is open. We start with Councillor Seymour Akwaka-Brown, Gregory, Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't support doing that, reviewing that bylaw ahead of the traffic bylaw, because we're going to end up with one piece of the process underway, potentially completed. We're going to review the heavy traffic bylaw, and we're going to immediately, potentially, need to make further reviews of this bylaw. And that just seems absolutely ridiculous. It's covered in the paper, and it's all about enforcement in the Inner Harbour. Well, we know that. I mean, we can work that out for ourselves. That's absolutely valid. But I'm just really concerned that we're taking one step before we've done the other step. We've talked about the heavy traffic bypass for about 5 years, and we're now getting ready to write a review and put the bylaw out and give people the opportunity to comment on it. following that, we would be in a much better position to do this process once. So it's not a huge area that would be left without a bylaw. Okay, I get entirely that we can't enforce what we put there, but it just seems to me that we're making work for ourselves and the community by doing one piece of work which has an impact on potentially this piece of work. So it just seems insane in an organisation that doesn't have enough people, we're told, to do the things we have to do, that we are doing a piecemeal approach that we'll end up needing to redo. So I don't support doing it now. I think we should get on and do the heavy traffic bylaw, the consultation, and put in those regs and then make this fit at the same time.
Through your worship, point of clarification for this is that it is actually one bylaw. So the heavy traffic, there are not two bylaws being created here. The consultation is around, so there's two options that are in there and we're going to wrap it all up into one as we go out with a bylaw.
But the paper tells us, through you, Madam Chair, the paper tells us it might need to be reviewed after the heavy traffic bylaw has been completed.
Through the chair, for clarity, the report indicates that these two issues are prompting the early review of the entire bylaw. As you know, we're already out for engagement. That will inform the drafting of the bylaw.
Are you saying then that we will be able to take into account, because I read in here that one would be ahead of the other. We need to take into account the outcomes of the heavy traffic bylaw, which is why we can't do this immediately.
Yeah, as you are aware, we're out for engagement on those heavy vehicle routes.
Well, we haven't seen the public paper for that.
I believe you have received and endorsed going out for engagement on
we
a
haven't
wide
seen
range
what
of
you've taken to
transport
the
issues.
public.
I can provide that for you.
Brown.
Kia ora. Yes, my question is just in the original kind of, I guess, first draft of this design, was this a consideration that this was going to happen? I just know that this Inner Harbour project has come with us a lot of feedback, of course, from the boat community as such in regards to parking, etc. And I'm just, were they made aware that at some point there would be some considerations around parking costs that would be, you know, next staging, I suppose, in this space? It's just the only reason is that we will get obviously kickback in that sense because there's already some unhappy customers, if you like. So in the original concept designs for this Inner Harbour workings, was parking part of that original? I'm just not sure.
Your worship, you could probably say that the whole design was based around satisfying parking requirements.
Yeah.
I think the issue that we've had, and we've been really clear with the fishing club, is that we have no mechanism to enforce any rules down there around parking. So we've been trying the best that we can do, given the circumstances through signage. But until we have a bylaw in place that captures that area, we cannot enforce people or give parking tickets, and you know. So.
Thank you. Pat, just your microphone. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. My question is there already time restricted parking down there, and what is it and where is it?
In the Inner Harbour, so no, there is not. And we can't, and if we were even to put up signs, we could not enforce them because we don't have a bylaw to enable that.
Just supplementary to that, it's difficult to make a decision if you don't know what's going to be down there, you know, like what the restrictions will be and what the impacts are on the people who work there and people that go there.
Yeah, appreciate that through your worship. So this is the first step, just getting approval that we will undertake this work prior to a bylaw being reviewed under its statutory timeframe. So you will get that draft bylaw, which will have the detail and an analysis of that. This is kind of high level scope, and are you okay with us to proceed? Is this the best way forward?
Councillor Robinson.
When reading this paper and the subsequent paper, what came to mind was something which has been noted to me by a number of members of the public, is the issue of engine braking. And the CE has confirmed for me this morning we currently don't capture engine braking in the bylaw. It clearly fits inside the parameters of this bylaw. It is an ongoing issue with the logging trucks using engine braking at wee hours of the morning. They're running seemingly 24/7. And I would strongly recommend that we instruct staff to include engine braking as part of the exploration and conversation to go with the bylaw review, which I see the bylaw is going to expire in December this year. So I would be very disappointed if we fail to pick that ball up in this round, given we wouldn't probably review this bylaw for a number of years subsequently.
Noted. Staff, noted.
Yes, through your worship, that other areas have restricted engine braking in heavily dense populated areas, residential areas, 50k, where it is safe to do so for the truck. So we could look at incorporating, we'll do casting it wider, look at what others have done in that space, and then come back with a recommendation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dowsing and then Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. My observation from this report is simply that the review is due regardless. It's December next year, not this year that it expires, but we need to go through this process regardless of the identification of a single area. The review needs to be done. So I'm happy to support it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dunn.
Yes, I might be again a little bit specific with my question. It's just in terms of the time, what's it called? Time restricted parking. Do we envision the big main car parks down there being time restricted, or will they be unlimited time, and that the time restrictions will be around the businesses? Or is the whole area going to be time restricted? Am I being a little bit specific? I'm just curious as to the detail in terms of the time restricted space. Like for example, if I work down there, would I be able to park in the Soho car park all day? Or is that going to be time restricted? Yeah.
Through your worship, unless Kate, Ms. Kohiri has the detail of that, or actually advance the thinking in that space, I can't respond to that at this stage.
Thank you. So, any more questions? Councillor
I'm just happy to
Foster.
move the paper, actually.
Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Dowsing. Anyone else that have not spoken? No. Councillor Robinson.
Page 25, paragraph 27, the comment on the climate change impacts implications, it says the traffic review is neutral in terms of impact on council and regional emissions. I disagree with that. I think it's maybe at best minimal, but I would hazard to say it's not neutral. Obviously encouraging parking and the use of vehicles does have an impact. So I just raised that point.
Thank you for that. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Let us move on to the operative date for Plan Change 4, moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Meredith Akuata-Brown. Any discussions? This is really straightforward. If there's no discussion, all in favour? Contrary? Carried. Okay, let us move on to page, is it 82? Yes, 82, housing in Tairawhiti. So this is in response to Manaki Tairawhiti that came and did a public deputation, and there's a good summary here of the work that has happened behind the scenes, the possible impacts for us and what we do. So would you like to give an overview first, or can I just open the floor?
Probably I'll just, if I may, through your worship. So this is really about the initial view from staff around having looked at what was provided. We haven't gone into detail around what those specific actions might mean for council in terms of resourcing and reprioritising things, and especially given in light of this current situation where things are sitting as all a bit unclear. What we're proposing here, I mean, I think the key things around what has been presented is that there's no doubt an issue here, and what was really good is that the stock take identified that. And what we're looking for council is to understand better the wider implications from purely a supply approach to addressing the issues. And is that supply approach going to address the other housing affordability issues that we know are sitting there? So our proposal is to carry out a workshop and just get some direction around where we think we can best add contribute in this space.
So first we've got Councillor Dunn, then Councillor Dowsing, and then Councillor Seymour, then Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thank you. This is a really good paper. I'm a bit hesitant on recommendation 2 to provide a detailed analysis. I think there's a really good analysis currently in the report as we've got it. I just wonder, is this absolutely necessary piece of work for staff? How long will it take? I just thought that the background paragraph 2 said everything that we need to know as decision makers, which is the impact it has on our direct role as a council, which is core infrastructure and our regulations. So I don't think that a detailed analysis is necessary. Maybe a workshop so that we can get a clearer understanding of what it will mean for council. Do we need to build new infrastructure? Do we need water? Do we need, and how quickly can we change our rule book? So I was thinking more a workshop that was aimed at us providing more direction on what the real impacts are for council underneath the roles that we hold, rather than going into an in-depth analysis of what's in that report.
Thank you.
So while the recommendations are good, I just don't know whether a detailed analysis of that extra work for the staff is really necessary.
So first have the workshop for us to
get a better understanding of what are the impacts on direct impacts on council, because we don't deal with rentals, we don't build houses, we don't. So while sure this is just looking at new builds and not looking at rentals, and while the staff have identified a whole lot of other parts to the housing strategy, I do not believe it is council's responsibility to go into that space. So it was just making that clear distinction.
Thank you for that, and noted. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I actually read this. I actually read that recommendation as what Councillor Dunn is describing, and I thought because the detailed analysis of the Gisborne housing strategy was to inform the workshop outlining the implications to council, and contrary to Councillor Dunn's statements, council is involved in all of those things. We currently have a subsidiary. We have a CCTO that owns a large residential block that is about to be developed. We have 120, is it, community houses. So we maintain and have housing. I think it's really important to acknowledge that actually the landscape has changed significantly since that report was written, and we're entering into a recession where we may see a lot of downturn for our community, and a lot of homeowners be in a position where they may be defaulting. There's a discussion for that workshop whether it's appropriate for us to leverage some of our equity to support those homeowners in the sense that we already provide community housing. Can we come up with a strategy to support underwriting of debt in the short term for people who may lose their home? There's a lot of decisions to be made around housing. 100% support an analysis of the housing strategy and the opportunity for a workshop to start debating the really difficult things that council has ahead of it. So I'll be happy to move this paper as the recommendations are written.
Thank you. Next, I had Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand three parts of the way the council done it, but my statement acknowledged the workshop. So there's no secondary. Just in general terms, I was in the throes of preparing a request for information which I was putting to the next council meeting, because I understand that there is actually a lot of zoned residential land here in our city, more than was given the impression of at the Manaki Tairawhiti presentation, and we need to look at how much zoned residential area we've got in our city now that is actually got infrastructure one thing I have a little think about is 1920, and I think there is an assumption made here, and there's assumptions made about high turnover of tenants and all those sort of rental market attracting suboptimal equilibrium. That's just jargon, and I don't think we've got a true reflection on some of those comments, but that's just personal comment that's been written, and there's always some perspective and other knowledge that is held by other people that have quite significant experience as landlords in this district. So, and there's nothing to stop a tenant and a landlord now agreeing to a long-term tenancy. And young New Zealanders, when they pick themselves up and go off to the UK, they have long-term tenancy. So it's just a state of mind, and it's just something we haven't done, but there's nothing to stop landlords doing that with their state land or a private land. So we just have to be careful about the assumption that may be wrong. Worst case scenarios, because you will always be in worst case scenarios.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Kohere.
Through the chair, just in response to that comment, it is a quote of a document. It
From the
wasn't really
report.
a position by council as such. It was identifying what has been reported. But further to as well to that second option you've been given, it really is an opportunity for council staff to provide you as council information around what council's position should be in terms of housing. So while there's a partnership approach around Manaaki Tairawhiti, I don't believe there's been a firm position established in terms of council and what direction you're heading in terms of housing provision. So there was quite a wide focus with the partners in that presentation around provision of social housing, and that's one aspect. There's the wider context nationally, and probably much more important now around how we provision housing. At the moment, the only council position we have is the aspiration that you have in your spatial plan. Council staff would like to understand that further, provide you with what we've enabled in terms of residential land provision, what other opportunities you have to demonstrate leadership in this space. And at the moment, council staff has skimmed over lightly. So I guess we're really looking for the opportunity to give you the opportunity to say where council sits in terms of provision for housing.
Okay, Councillor Foster, Councillor Warsnop, Councillor first Cranston, then Warsnop, then Foster, then Robinson. Remember that, people. Go, Andy.
Yeah, it's been questioned. Sorry. It's been questioned what can council do, and we've got a couple of points there. Council is key to enabling the development of affordable housing. I'm not sure about that. And the other one is responsibility around increasing the supply of new build. Those that have been around the table for a while have heard me argue this before, but one area we can have an impact in is the development contributions. And I've long argued that infill housing should have a different structure of development contributions than greenfield. And if I personalise it so I can sort of demonstrate that quite well, what the development contributions do is for your road and your water, your reserves and your footpaths, etc. going forward. But when you do infill housing, you may be in a block that you're doing 1 or 2 builds, and you really aren't having a major impact on that footpath or the road or the water pipes and that. So I would argue that infill housing has less impact. But what the infill housing does do, I had one situation where I bought an old house that was paying 2,200 rates a year, and I subdivided that section into 3. So now, in the 10-year period, that development will be giving 100,000 in rates, whereas it would have been giving about 28,000 in rates on it in a 10-year period. So if the restriction of the developer is that it's looking unaffordable to do the developer, then he doesn't do that. So then we miss out on the extra rates that the developer does put into the rating pot over a long period of time going forward. Split development contributions are used by other councils. I see them used in a differential with infill housing and greenfield in other centres, and to me it makes a lot of sense. So it is an opportunity we have of making development for the requirement of new build a bit easier on the developers and encourage the developers in a way. So I think I'm not sure where we are with development contribution, but that is probably one of the only levers we've got to pull.
Thank you. I had Warsnop next. Thank you, Councillor Warsnop, and then Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question was around whether the scope of the workshop will incorporate seasonal worker accommodation and the effect that seasonal workers have on our housing stock periodically, obviously maybe less so in the near term, but for our hort sector, which has clearly got some massive upside coming, I just really want to put some emphasis on the fact that it'd be awesome to have some really good information come out on that so that we get to make that part of the conversation.
Through the chair, it's a known issue, and I anticipate that some analysis around the impact and what council can do to respond to that would be part of that.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
I'd like to second Councillor Dowsing's recommendation, please. That's an inclusion of number 2. And also I want to acknowledge Councillor Princeton's statement too, because at the end of the day, getting a stock of all our possibilities for infill is probably one of the biggest areas for us to accommodate our housing shortage at the moment, and totally support any incentives that we can give to encourage property owners to subdivide and to maximise the opportunity now of having 400 square metre sections being utilised from bigger ones. So I see that as a huge area. I'd like to know actually in our workshop the amount of properties that we've got that would be significant to that future development, because we'd get a really strong handle on what's possible in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO.
Yes, and through your worship, just to that point about subdivisions, surprisingly, when we looked at it, there's not a lot of subdivisions actually happening. So it's really trying to understand, well, what's preventing subdivisions from happening? Is it because we in Tairawhiti like our big open spaces and therefore we don't want to carve up part of our property, or is it because it's an actual consenting issue to go through, and therefore do we need to look at our plan rules and how do we swiftly change those to allow for that, recognising what the other implications are for infill development, because my understanding is that it actually does have implications for our infrastructure provision. So yeah, it's a big piece of work, and I think going through the workshop and then prioritising where to put our resources and energy into is going to be critical for us in order to be able to practically deliver something.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, you're next.
I really struggled with this report because it seems to say the right things, but I think on close inspection it really doesn't. Under the summary it says if the recommendations from Manaaki Tairawhiti are endorsed, but that isn't part of the recommendations that are subsequently listed at the bottom of page 1. The report talks about the Gisborne housing strategy on page 1, but then subsequently at paragraphs 10, for example, and paragraph 27 talks about what the final Gisborne housing strategy may look like. So on one hand, it talks about as if it's a final report that we're analysing and assessing, and then it talks about what a final strategy might look like. From my perspective, and bearing in mind the recent editorial from the paper asking what is the barrier GDC to housing development, the answer came back that the answer provided by council to Mr. Muir was that we do not know the impact of subdivision on the infrastructure. Now that is addressed at paragraph 22, but it is extremely vague. In some areas, the municipal wastewater network is already near capacity or subpar condition. It talks about hotspots, I don't know what that's meant to be, and it talks about there are also likely to be competing interests for spare, quote, spare capacity. I don't know what that means. So what I believe we need to know as soon as possible is actually what areas in Tairawhiti, in Gisborne City, can have subdivision in them, what cannot, not a case may not, but cannot because the infrastructure physically cannot handle it. That's what the information we've been told publicly, the public's been told, is stopping us launching forward to identifying areas for development. We do not need, as Councillor Dunn has, I believe, rightly said, another report to analyse what the Manaaki Tairawhiti report said, because our spatial plan has already said, we've had a lot of work determining that we have a role to play and what our ambitions are. What we need to do is actually get into the nuts and bolts, determine what are the barriers, and actually do that in a really timely fashion. Because I recall an expert on the front page of the Gisborne Herald 2 years ago, walking around with Mr. Wilson and other staff, identifying the areas in Gisborne City which were ripe for subdivision development. Now, if the minds within this organisation hadn't turned themselves to, oh goodness me, the poo pipe's got to be big enough in 2 years, then there's something fundamentally wrong with this place. Can we please get that answered now, and then move on to identifying what suburbs can then hold infill housing? And that is, as Andy Cranston is right, as Councillor Cranston has rightly said, is probably the most readable source of additional housing in this city. Thank you.
For your worship, so was that question that can you have the information about where we can actually develop or where we cannot?
We have been told, and the public's been told, that we cannot answer that question until we identify the infrastructure barriers to development. It's kind of just vaguely touched on in paragraph 22. What's missing in this report recommendation, and my addendum to it was, to put the point 2 of the recommendations was, and identifying all potential barriers to implementing a housing strategy action plan. We don't need to assess what the action plan might be. We don't need to sit around and observe our navels any longer. We just need to actually identify what's stopping us doing housing development. This is what housing developers are asking me, architects are asking me, surveyors are asking me, because they're told, oh, well, we don't know which areas because we don't know what the infrastructure is going to handle.
If I can just make a comment, we need to be mindful that this paper is a response to the deputation that Manaaki Tairawhiti is making. All the comments that I hear are absolutely valid comments and stuff that we will absolutely address. But just to bring us back to what we have in front of us right now, is the purpose of this report is a response to the deputation. So I just want to make sure we touch off all bases and take absolute note of everything that is said here, because that's going to move us forward. But this report is dealing with that deputation. Thank you.
Can you just wait? I might add, so we can, through our planning provision, say where the development could go. We've got plans that allow for that. It's not about can, it's actually around should you, and what are the reasons why you shouldn't. And so that requires, or should, that requires a workshop. It's not something that we can just go, here you go, here's a plan, go for it. It's something that you actually need to workshop with us, so that so that we are clear about what those implications are from the decisions that you make. And I understand that this is not, you don't want another report to come back. We want some action, and so that workshop will be action orientated.
Yep, thank you. So what I pick up from everyone that has spoken here today is that we are ready to go. We have this report from Manaaki Tairawhiti. They've already done some work in the background. We are now ready to go, and the next step for us is to have that workshop that is action orientated with all the information that has now been highlighted, and staff has been taking notes. So next for us would be to set a date to get this work cracking. Councillor Seymour and then Councillor Akwater-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's Councillor Robinson's comments are actually behind the comments that I was making, because until we know what is zoned residential now, because the feedback after that article in the paper, it's not the fault of the district plan, it's just the fault of the lack of infrastructure in places. So that's what I was going to write about. We need to know exactly what Councillor Robinson was saying, that we're both saying the same thing in different words. And I would rather we not call this thing a housing strategy, because I don't think it is a housing strategy once council gets to be doing something.
Good, let's just get to our workshop and get all the info.
Well, we'll be lucky, that'll take a while. We need to hear from the chief executive how long it's going to write a report, because it's no good actually having a strategy meeting if we can't say whether there's X hectares in Y area or half a hectare somewhere else. We need to understand.
April, May.
Yeah, so through your worship, I think what we've got proposed in next steps was an in-depth review. which would have been another report. What I've heard is that no more reports, let's actually get into the workshop, bring some information there and let's make some decision, well, provide some direction, which will then go into a report later. But that's the cue I'm taking. I've got some notes here around things that want to be looked up, bring up the zoned residential land, what are others doing with development contributions, impact of infill housing, subdivision, seasonal workers. So we'll go and work on what that workshop will look like, bringing back some information so that we can actually, work faster.
Last, Councillor Akuata Brown, I think we all agree that we want to workshop this and get action started.
Hallelujah. Yes, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, all of you that have been working in this space, and a kia ora to Manaaki Tairawhiti for their deputation and workshopping the space. Having been in this space for 6 and a bit years now, and hearing a lot around housing crises and all the frameworks, there's a bullet point that sits really, in my view, at the top end of what this is all about. And it's at number 13, the Gisborne Housing Strategy. Bullet point number 4 says that acknowledges that shelter is a fundamental human need. And I think out of all our action points of what we are doing to move forward, that is what we know that right now we need to do, is we actually need to ensure that people have shelter, a warm, dry, safe home, as it meets our basic human needs. Recently on Facebook, a mum with children was sharing her story, her plight of her rental that was sold. They had to move out. It made front page of newspaper. And recently she has been awarded a home from the state. I don't want to see people have to share their personal life stories in a tearful kind of space to ensure a home. I think as a council, we've been asked to show our leadership role, in which I believe we're doing now. So thank you, Madam C, for your kōrero to getting on with the task at hand and knowing the barriers that do exist, meeting the solutions to those barriers. And we are here to support the actions that we can all do to make housing a less of a crisis in our region. So I'm very grateful that we're doing this mahi, and it's going to happen now. So thank you.
Excuse me, there's someone else who's speaking before you.
I just wanted to reiterate what I said earlier, is housing is absolutely fundamental in this region. I think we need to get clear on what council's roles and responsibilities are in the housing area. We currently do not build houses, which is what this housing strategy is about. We, as in this council, our subsidiary may, but we need to get very clear what role we want to play. If we decide that we want to start building houses, then by all means, let's start building houses. But we just need to be careful that we already have a lot of priorities for the region, and to add another one, when we don't have the money or nor the time nor the staff to do it. So I really look forward to the workshop so we can get that clarification on what are our roles and responsibilities, how far do we want to go, where do we want to pull back.
So there's a clear signal here today that we will do a workshop, we will have an action plan, there's no need to analyse. So number 2, we can change the wording to suit what if it's all right with our mover and seconder, who is Mr. Dowsing and Mr. Foster, just to direct the Chief Executive to organise a council workshop outlining the implications for council and the community in order to inform the development of an action plan. So we want the information in order for us to develop an action plan. Are the mover and the seconder happy with those word changes?
That's already exactly what it states. It says the Chief Executive will provide a detailed analysis to a workshop.
No, it says provide a detailed analysis of the housing strategy that Manaaki Tairawhiti.
Yeah, okay, we'll remove the housing strategy.
Great.
And that's it, yeah.
All in favour? Contrary, carried. Let's have a cup of tea and come back at 10:30. Thank you. Hello, Josh. I want to revoke Councillor Wharehinga's apology, understanding ordinance 12.7. He's part of this meeting. He's part of this meeting. He is listening in. He has been texting through votes, which we will have to work with in the future because I can't run the meeting and look at that, but we will sort that out. So I revoke his apology. Seconded by Councillor Cranston. All in favour? I move a full apology for Councillor Burdett. Seconded by Councillor Seymour. All in favour? Contrary